Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here today to show you how I'm doing my new version of what I'm calling my Breathe Easy tincture or extract. Technically I see it as an extract because of the different types of solvents I use and because of how strong I try to make it. An extract typically can be more potent, surprisingly enough, but a tincture is typically made from a high proof alcohol, which I don't use that often. So as you might notice, I'm wearing one of my new crossback aprons. Of course, you can only see this part of it. It's nice and loose and comfy, so kind of a weird choice of plaid with floral, but I'm not minding it. So what I'm going to be using in this is the mullein and usnea, which is also known as old man's beard. That's what it's most commonly called around here, and we get quite a bit of it in our very wet climate. And some astragalus root. This is the newest addition. You can see right here my most recent batch that I got started. It's already getting quite dark. It amazes me how dark it gets, but that is partly because I do try to make it so strong. And here's what the finished product looks like in color. See how dark that is? Because I always leave such things for no less than 2 months, preferably much longer if I can, so that they're very, very strong. So at least 6 months to a year even. Sometimes longer if I forget it's back there and I don't need it. So I don't have any exact measurements, but I can show you at least what I'm doing here. So these 3 herbs are just 3 of the ones that can be very good for lung health. Mullein is known especially for that, being good for lung health in general. And I have a video on each one of these, and I'll link to the individual videos down below and their many benefits and how you can use them. Usnea not only is great for lung health and even is known as lungs of the forest, but it's also a natural antibiotic and antiviral and antifungal. So if you have any kind of lung infection caused by any of those, that will be helpful at fighting the infection as well as helping the lungs, generally speaking. And then astragalus root is another good one for lung health. It is also very good for boosting your immunity and helping to fight colds and flus. So one of the reasons I decided to start adding it to this mixture. So what I'm going to do first is start adding the mullein. I like to put it on the bottom because it tends to want to float to the top, where these other things can kind of help hold it under the liquid. And you'll see, let me hold this up so you can see better, and I'll try to zoom in. I'm going to put quite a bit in my jar. So you see how much I got in there? Almost 1/3 of the jar filled up with the mullein. So that's mullein leaf. Now I'm going to take some of the usnea. Basically all I do with the usnea is when we gather it from other piece of property, I bring it in, pick out all the stuff, especially if it's some like this recent batch that was gathered off the ground, and then rinse it off and then just let it dry on a towel, air dry, because it dries quite quickly. You don't need to put it in a dehydrator. So we don't really need the funnel on here. I actually remembered the funnel this time. And then I just shove that in there so you can see what that looks like. Now I'm going to take the astragalus root, and I don't use as much of the astragalus root, but probably about that much. Just a good pinch or handful of it. And then I'm just going to take that and start shoving it down along the sides. And you can also put that in next if you want, rather than putting the usnea in next. And I might, after I get my alcohol in there, I may decide to, or my solvent, I'll just say solvent, I may decide to add more. I know, I just threw a piece on the ground. Just ignore it. And then I'll just throw those couple pieces on top. So you can see how full my jar is. So my solvent today, as in most occasions, is going to be my homemade wine from my own homegrown organic grapes. And one of the reasons I use wine is not only is it a decent preservative as is, it also adds better flavor than vodka, and it's practically free. I'm just going to pour that right over the top. and drip it all over my kitchen board as I'm at it. And you can see it's bubbling, you might be able to see, because it is working all the way around the herbs, and especially the usnea, which has a lot of airspace in there. So I'm just going to allow it to keep doing that. I might even decide to throw a little bit more of the usnea in there. In fact, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to shove a little bit more in there just because I want to. This is some powerful stuff right here. Now I'm going to top it off some more. I love using the homemade wine. And some people worry, well, what's the shelf life? I use, this high proof alcohol because it has indefinite shelf life. Well, I say the same thing about wine or vinegar. As long as you're keeping it all sealed up well, it shouldn't be a problem. I've never had issues with my wine or vinegar based extracts going bad, and they can sit for years before I finally use them, and that is not refrigerated. And so then at this point, I'm going to put my lid on. You can see what I'm doing here is I'm using a recycled lid. I started using these now more for infusing oils and extract making than my canning jars. I kind of like using these a lot better. They've already got, the coating on the inside to protect the lid and give it a little bit better seal. And then just shake it up really good. And there we go. So I got the latest extract started. So again, when it comes to allowing these things to extract, I like to leave them out for a few days so I can see it and shake it up every so often, see if I need to top it off a little bit more. It looks like I could put a little bit more in there. And then I will also date it on the top and say what it is. And then I will put it back in my dark cabinet where I have all of my medicinal extracts. Is where I store them, is where I infuse them. But again, you can see the difference in color here. And this is just so much more dark as it's extracted a lot of the goodness from here, and it will continue to get dark over time. I did have a fourth one of these beer bottles I picked up at a garage sale years ago. I love these for storing the extracts after I've strained them out and we're working through them. So I keep this in a special box on top of my refrigerator for easy access. So I have one for my antibiotic, I have one for my pain relief formula, for our deep sleep and muscle relaxer formula, and for the lung health or breathe easy. So I just label it on top so I can tell the difference. And this has been some really good stuff to help with various different lung ailments, which was hardly an issue before, but ever since that virus that took over the world, I've noticed that Patrick and I both just kind of every now and then just kind of have to deal with it, but especially Patrick because of his previous job as a water treatment operator and some of the very toxic chemicals he would get exposed to. Even when he was wearing his PPE, sometimes accidents would happen. And so he's still paying the price for that, but that's why, I like to keep plenty of this on hand. And the great thing about this is this particular formula is also good for your dogs. So if you have dogs that have any kind of lung issue, this will be very, very helpful for them. And so this is about the size, the amount we take. I usually take a little bit less. So this is your standard shot glass, which is usually less than about a quarter cup, or is right at about 2 ounces. So I would say 1 ounce to 2 ounces tops. If you're making it from a higher proof alcohol like vodka or even Everclear, which I never use, then you can minimize the amount you have to take typically. But again, for me, this is just tastes better and is virtually free because I'm making the wine myself out of stuff I grow myself. Now, one other thing I want to make clear, that when it comes to using this, when you go to strain it, because of the mullein has these little fine hairs on it that when it's dehydrated, they're just like a little tiny little needles. And if you make a tea out of it or a tincture and you don't strain it well, those little hairs will get in there and kind of get stuck in your throat and sort of, it's not horrible, but it will make your throat itch and cause you to cough. So what I recommend, instead of like all my other extracts, I just strain through a stainless steel fine mesh strainer. But for this, I use the same strainer, but I put like a very fine woven cheesecloth or some cotton, 100% cotton material that I keep in here specifically for such things, and then strain it through that. That will help prevent all the little hairs from getting in there. I actually haven't had any issue since doing it that way. And same thing goes with the tea. You know, if you're making a tea, you want to put your mullein into something that's very fine and will keep those little hairs from getting into your tea. I made that mistake the first time I made mullein tea. Is I just threw it into the pot like I do all my other herbs and then poured it and started drinking it. I was like, man, why does my throat keep itching? And that was why. So the teapot I have now has a fine mesh insert you stick in there, and whenever I'm making mullein tea in particular, I'll use that, and no problems, because it's such a fine mesh you can barely even tell there's holes in it when you look at it. So that works really well. So anyway, this is just my idea. This is just my recipe. However, I do have a video out where I did a list of many other herbs, including these, that are good for lung health, that I'll also link in the description box down below, so you can look through those and maybe find something that's better suited for you before you start getting into making an extract. Maybe usnea is too hard for you to find where you live, or maybe mullein, you live in a very cold, wet, damp climate where mullein doesn't grow very well, and you're having I finally, by the way, was able to get it to grow here, but it took a lot of trial and error. Or maybe any of these things you may have allergic reactions to or whatever. So it's always good to have a long list of many things that you can select from that you know will work best for you or for whoever you're giving the medication to or the extract tincture to. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Any thoughts and ideas you'd like to share, please put them in comments down below. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.